My name is Grace. I'm in my mid-40s now. And for as long as I can remember, I've been caught in the shadow of everyone else. It's a feeling I've grown used to. But it doesn't make it any easier. I've always been the one who steps back to let others shine. The one who quietly makes sacrifices without a word. The one who doesn't rock the boat. It's how I've lived my life. And in many ways, it's been my role self-imposed. Or perhaps, expected. I've worked as a financial analyst for nearly 2 decades now. On paper, my career should have been something to be proud of. But somehow, it never felt like enough. My colleagues might give me a nod of respect. But at home, there was always an undertone of expectation, as if what I did could never quite measure up to the grandeur my parents envisioned for me. I've spent my career analyzing numbers, forecasting markets, and navigating the high-stakes world of finance. But despite my accomplishments, I've never felt the satisfaction of true recognition, at least not the kind I was hoping for from the people who matter most, my family. Growing up, I was always the steady one, the reliable daughter. My younger sister, Sarah, was the one who got the applause. She was always the star, bright, charming, successful in everything she did, and I was always in the background, holding the fort, making sure things ran smoothly without complaint. My parents, with their ever higher expectations, never seemed to understand the pressure I was under. They would praise Sarah endlessly, showering her with attention, while I was often left to clean up the messes she'd leave behind. The comparison was relentless, and no matter what I did, I never seemed to match up. I remember how it used to hurt when my parents would say things like, "Why can't you be more like Sarah? Or you should try being more outgoing. Like your sister." I was different from Sarah, not just in our personalities, but in the way we approached life. She had always been the social butterfly, the one who could charm anyone in a room, while I was the quiet one, focused and reserved, but it was never enough. My quieter, more methodical approach was seen as something to tolerate rather than celebrate. At home, I was the one who took care of everything. If there was a problem, I fixed it. If someone needed something, I was there. I was the rock of the family, but never the person anyone seemed to appreciate. My parents saw me as the responsible one, the one who could be counted on to do the hard work in the background. They rarely said thank you or acknowledged my efforts. It was just expected. My younger sister, on the other hand, was the one they lavished praise upon, the one they celebrated for her achievements. She was their shining star. I was always overshadowed, but I accepted it. I had no choice. Over the years, I learned to bury my disappointment. I became the reliable daughter, the steady one, the one who kept the family together even when I felt completely unseen. I was the one who made the sacrifices, who quietly deferred my own needs and desires for the sake of others. I did it because it was expected of me, because somewhere along the way, I decided that my worth would always be tied to what I could do for others. I thought that if I kept my head down and did what was needed, eventually, they would see me, but they never did. And so, I kept going. I built a career. I lived alone in a modest apartment, and I made my way through life quietly, never causing a stir, but deep down, I felt overlooked, underappreciated, and unfulfilled. The recognition I longed for both professionally and personally never came. It's as if I've been living in a world where everyone else gets the spotlight, while I'm left in the shadows, hoping someone, someday, would notice me for who I am, rather than what I could do for them. But it seems that day never came. This is the life I've built for myself, a life of quiet sacrifices, of playing second fiddle, of living in the shadow of others' expectations, and yet, somewhere in me, I knew that it couldn't go on forever, but I never imagined that the moment when everything would change, when my true worth would finally be recognized, would come in the most painful, shocking way imaginable. The summer of my brother's wedding was supposed to be a time of celebration. Weddings, after all, are meant to bring families together, to mark new beginnings and to honor traditions. But for me, that summer became the catalyst for an unraveling that would leave me questioning everything I knew about my family. It wasn't just the wedding itself that caused the damage, it was what I discovered in the weeks leading up to it, and what was revealed to me that night. My brother, Tom, had always been a bit of a wild card. The family never quite knew what to expect from him. He wasn't the diligent, responsible child like I was. He was the fun one, the one who took risks, who followed his own path and who always seemed to get away with it. He was charismatic and charming, and no matter how hard I worked, I could never quite earn the same affection and approval he received. But his wedding was supposed to be different. This was supposed to be a day for our family to unite, to celebrate the love he had found with his fiancée, a woman named Caroline, who had charmed everyone with her beauty and grace. It should have been a joyous occasion, but it turned out to be the turning point in my life, a point from which nothing would ever be the same. As the day of the wedding approached, I was struck by how little attention my parents seemed to pay me. Their focus was entirely on Tom and his new wife, Caroline. It wasn't unusual, but this time it felt different. My role in the wedding had been minimized. I wasn't asked to be a bridesmaid. Not that I minded too much. I had long accepted my position in the family as the quiet one, the one who always made herself scarce when attention was being given to others. But as the event drew closer, something inside me started to twist uncomfortably. When the invitations arrived, I noticed something odd. My name was not listed as one of the main guests. There were several names under the VIP section, including relatives I barely knew, but not mine. Confused, I asked my mother about it. "Mom," I said, trying to mask my hurt with a forced calm, "why wasn't I included in the VIP list?" Her response was immediate, but cold. "We didn't want the extra stress, Grace. Tom and Caroline wanted a smaller, more intimate gathering. You're still invited, just not on the front row." The sting of her words hit harder than I expected. Just not on the front row. It felt as though my presence had been relegated to an afterthought, as though I was nothing more than a background character in my brother's big day. I swallowed my disappointment, telling myself it was just a small issue, something I could easily let go, but deep down, I knew it was more than that. The night before the wedding, something happened that completely shattered my composure. I overheard a conversation between my parents in the living room. I had been walking past the door when I heard my father's voice, stern and low. "We can't let her interfere tomorrow," he said. "It'll be too much. She's already been difficult enough with everything, her career, her personal life. It's not the right time to bring her into the spotlight." My mother's voice followed, softer but equally dismissive. "She'll be fine. She always is. Besides, we don't need her overshadowing Tom. She can't seem to let go of being the center of attention. This is Tom's day, not hers." I stood frozen, heart pounding in my chest. My own parents, the ones who had always been my pillar, my source of strength, were discussing me like I was a burden. They didn't see me as their daughter. They saw me as an inconvenience. But the worst part came later. At the wedding reception, the ballroom was stunning. A lavish affair, with over 300 guests attending. The decorations were flawless, the food exquisite. As I arrived and sat down at my assigned table towards the back, of course I noticed the gifts everyone was giving the newlyweds. There were diamond watches, luxury vacations, designer handbags. The total value of the wedding gifts easily exceeded $100. $100. But the worst shock came when I saw my parents, standing near the couple as they opened the gifts. They handed over an envelope one I didn't see clearly at first, but later realized contained a check for $1 million. They were literally giving Tom and Caroline the equivalent of a small fortune, all while I had been pushed to the sidelines. As the night unfolded, I couldn't help but feel the sharp sting of betrayal. It wasn't just the exclusion from the VIP list or the minimal acknowledgement of my presence. It was the sudden realization that the financial divide between me and my siblings had always been much bigger than I ever knew. This wasn't just about my lack of recognition. It was about the fact that I was never intended to inherit a piece of this wealth. It wasn't until later, as I overheard another conversation between my parents, that I learned the shocking truth. The wealth they had accumulated over the years, approximately $50 million in investments, properties, and assets, was never meant for me. They had been quietly planning to divide it all between Tom and Sarah, who had always been the favored children in their eyes. I was the outcast, the one who would get nothing. The pain of that revelation hit me like a physical blow. All my life, I had believed that my family valued me, that they saw my quiet sacrifices and efforts, but in the end, it wasn't about love or loyalty. It was about money, and in that moment, I realized just how deeply I had been deceived by the very people who had sworn to care for me. I felt hollow, like I was drifting away from the world I had once known, and as I sat there, watching my family revel in their wealth and success, I understood something painfully clear: I had always been expendable. The sting of betrayal pierced through me with a force I had never known. My heart raced, my breath shallow. I stood there at the edge of the reception, watching the glitz and glamour of my brother's wedding unfold. But all I could see was the hollow emptiness of the moment. It wasn't just the fact that I had been excluded from the VIP section, or that my presence seemed so irrelevant to my parents. It was the realization that my entire life, the sacrifices I had made, the quiet support I had always given, had meant nothing. I had been manipulated, overlooked, and taken for granted. It was all a lie. A facade built on the idea that family was supposed to come first. But in that moment, I saw the truth for my parents. Family had always been about power, status, and wealth, and I was nothing but a secondary character in their carefully curated story. I could feel my chest tighten, the bitter taste of anger mixing with a deep sense of sorrow. I had been such a fool. How could I not have seen it? How could I have been so blind to the ways they had used me, taken advantage of my loyalty, and kept me in the dark about their plans? They never saw me as an equal. I had always been the one who was expected to quietly carry the weight, to sacrifice my time, my energy, and my dreams for the sake of family. All the while, they were stacking up their wealth, dividing it between the people they truly favored. It hurt more than I could put into words. Not just the exclusion, not just the hidden wealth. It was the realization that I had never been seen for who I truly was, for what I had accomplished, for what I had given. Tears began to blur my vision, and I excused myself from the party. Needing to find some solitude, I made my way to a quiet corner of the ballroom, away from the laughter and celebration. The cold marble walls felt like the only thing holding me together. I sank down against them, wrapping my arms around my knees, and let the tears fall. I had never cried like this before. It wasn't just the shock of the moment, it was the years of hurt that had been building up. The resentment I had never let myself feel. Now, all of it came crashing down. The sound of the laughter from the reception felt distant, as though I were on the outside looking in, a mere observer to my own life. I wanted to scream, to confront my parents, to demand answers, but even in my pain, I knew that wouldn't fix anything. Confrontation, in my family, had never led to understanding. It only led to more distance, more hurt, and more silence. And so, I sat there, alone with my thoughts. Could I truly walk away from them? Could I cut myself off from the people I had always tried to please? Always tried to live up to the idea of leaving them behind? Of severing ties with my family was both liberating and terrifying. For years, I had held on to the belief that family was everything. Even when they ignored me, even when they belittled my accomplishments, I kept telling myself that this was all part of the dynamic, that I was simply the one who had to bear the burden. But now, in the silence of the moment, I realized how much of myself I had given away, how much I had sacrificed for the sake of being the reliable one, the good one, the obedient one. I thought about the years of my life spent quietly working for their approval, spent making sure everything was taken care of, making sure that their needs came before mine. I thought about the countless times my parents had made me feel like my achievements didn't matter, like I was never good enough because I wasn't the one who got the attention. I remembered the way they had always compared me to my younger siblings, as if I was invisible, as if my quiet strength and resilience meant nothing compared to Sarah's extroverted charm and Tom's reckless bravado. They had always been so proud of them, so eager to show off their accomplishments, but I was always relegated to the background. I had never asked for praise or recognition. I had simply wanted to feel like I mattered, like my presence in the family wasn't an afterthought. But now, even that small hope had been dashed. The $1 million check they handed over to Tom and Caroline, that was my wake-up call. It was clear that my family had never seen me as anything other than the helper, the caretaker, the one who could be counted on when things needed to be done. They didn't value me for who I was. They valued me for what I could do for them. The more I thought about it, the more I realized just how far gone things had become. All my life, I had placed my self-worth in the hands of others. I had placed it in my parents' approval, in their praise, in the idea that if I just kept doing the right thing, kept being the good daughter, eventually they would see me. But they never did, and now, they never would. I stood up, wiping my tears away. I had to leave. I couldn't stay in that place any longer. The weight of my family's expectations was too much. It felt suffocating. I didn't know where I would go, but I knew I couldn't stay. The only thing I could do now was reclaim some semblance of control over my own life. As I walked out of the ballroom, I felt a strange mixture of relief and sadness. The wedding was still going on. The guests still dancing, still celebrating, oblivious to the quiet storm raging inside me. I had been living in the shadows for so long. I had forgotten what it felt like to stand in the light. But now, I wasn't sure if I even wanted to be in their light anymore. Their light was dim, full of false pretenses and hidden agendas. It wasn't the kind of light I needed. I knew that I had to let go of the fantasy I had been holding on to. I couldn't keep waiting for a family that would never see me. But the question remained, could I really walk away from everything? From the people who had shaped my life, for better or worse? And what would I do with the pieces of myself that had been left behind in the wake of this betrayal? In the stillness of the night, as I left the wedding behind me, I realized that I had to start answering those questions. I had to find out who I was without their expectations, without their manipulation. I had to rebuild my life from the ground up. But first, I had to leave. I had to walk away, and that was the hardest step of all. The air was thick with tension as I stood at the back of the reception hall, my mind racing with thoughts of what I was about to do. The grand ballroom was filled with laughter, clinking glasses, and the hum of conversation, but it all felt so distant to me. The glimmering chandeliers above, the extravagant decorations, the clamor of the guests, it all seemed so far away, as if I were living in a world of my own. But now, I was standing at the edge of something much bigger than a wedding, something that would force everyone in this room to see the truth. I couldn't do this anymore. I couldn't continue to play the role of the invisible daughter, the one who silently took the back seat while others took center stage. Not when I knew what I knew, not when I had finally uncovered the depths of the deception that had been going on behind closed doors for years. My parents, who had always made it clear that I was too independent, too stubborn, too much of a black sheep, were hiding something that would make all of their past judgments meaningless. It had been several days since the wedding reception, and I had been stewing in my anger, disappointment, and hurt. The money, $50 million hidden away in investments and savings, something they never mentioned to me, never shared. The extravagant gifts, the $1 million check to Tom and Caroline, none of it was for me. I was expendable, nothing more than a caretaker, the one who was always supposed to put the family's needs before mine. But this time, I couldn't stay quiet, not anymore. My mind was made up. I would confront them. I would show them that I wasn't just the reliable, obedient daughter who took whatever scraps they offered. I was more than that, and they would finally have to see it, even if they hated me for it. As I walked toward the front of the room, the whispers grew louder, People were watching me now. They must have noticed something in my expression, some shift in the way I carried myself. My heart pounded in my chest. But I didn't stop. I couldn't. I reached the stage, where Sarah was standing, poised and confident, ready to give her speech. She smiled as she saw me approach, but her smile faltered slightly as I stepped up to the microphone. "Grace," she said softly. Her voice strained. "What are you?" Before she could finish, I grabbed the microphone, turning to face the crowd. The eyes of my family all fixed on me. The room fell silent, the noise from the reception dying down as people turned their attention toward me. For a moment, I felt a surge of power, a rush of adrenaline. This was it. I was about to make my stand. I took a deep breath, and as I looked at my parents, I spoke. "Ladies and gentlemen, I'm Grace, Sarah's older sister, and I'm sure you've heard a lot about me over the years. Maybe you've heard that I'm the quiet one, or the responsible one, the one who always gets the short end of the stick." I paused, letting the words sink in. But today, I'm here to speak the truth. I turned my gaze toward my parents. My mother was sitting in the front row, her eyes wide with shock, while my father looked more composed. Though the tension in his face was unmistakable, Sarah's expression was a mix of confusion and concern. "For years," I continued, "I've been kept in the dark. For years. I've been the one who took care of everything, the one who made the sacrifices while everyone else got the glory. But today, I'm going to expose something that I know has been kept hidden from me and from all of you." The crowd murmured in confusion, unsure of what I was saying. My heart raced, but I forced myself to stay calm. "My parents," I said, my voice growing stronger, "have been hiding something from me, something that, until very recently, I never knew about. While they've pretended to live modestly, while they've criticized me for not measuring up, they've been amassing a fortune $50 million, and that's just what I've discovered." A gasp rippled through the room. My parents' faces drained of color, and I could feel the weight of their gaze burning into me. My father's hand clenched around the edge of his chair, and my mother looked as though she might faint. The room buzzed with disbelief. But I wasn't done. I've never been included in any of their discussions about money. I went on. I was always told that I wasn't good enough, that I didn't deserve their support, that I should just settle for what I had. But while I worked hard for every penny, while I struggled to build a career on my own, my parents were quietly preparing to divide all of this wealth between my siblings. I paused, letting the words sink in. Tom and Sarah get it all, and I'm left with nothing, just like always. My father stood abruptly, his face turning red with anger. "That's enough, Grace," he shouted, his voice sharp. "You're wrong. You don't know what you're talking about." But I wasn't backing down. "Oh, I know exactly what I'm talking about, Dad," I said, my voice steady. "I've seen the bank statements. I've seen the investments. You've been hiding it from me for years, and all while you've made me feel like I was nothing." I glanced at Sarah, who had gone pale, her eyes wide with confusion and fear. "Sarah, you deserve to know this too," I said softly, my voice full of emotion. "You deserve to know what they've been hiding, and maybe, just maybe, you deserve to understand why I'm so angry. I've spent my whole life being told I wasn't enough, but now I see the truth, and it hurts." My father took a step forward, his face flushed with rage. "You're making a spectacle of yourself. Grace, this isn't the time or the place for this. We can talk about this later, but not here, not in front of everyone." But the damage had already been done. The truth was out there now, and the room was filled with uncomfortable silence. My mother's face was a mask of disbelief, and my father was struggling to maintain his composure. They had always put on a perfect facade until now. "Dad, it's too late," I said, my voice trembling with a mix of sadness and anger. "You can't deny it anymore. You've spent years making me feel small, insignificant, like I wasn't worthy of your love or support. But now, you have to face the truth. Your greed, your favoritism, it's all been exposed." There was a long pause, a heavy silence that stretched on far too long, and then, my father, the man who had always been so sure of himself, who had always berated me for my independence, finally spoke. "Grace," he said, his voice quieter now. "I don't know what to say. I didn't want it to come to this, but I was trying to protect you, protect all of you. I thought I was doing the right thing." But the words were hollow. The facade had cracked. My parents were no longer the perfect, untouchable figures they had always been, and in that moment, I realized that I didn't need their approval anymore. I didn't need them to tell me I was worth something. I had already proven it to myself. The room was still in shock. Sarah was staring at me, her face a mixture of disbelief and confusion. But I didn't care anymore. It didn't matter what they thought of me. What mattered was that I had finally taken control of my own narrative. I turned to face the crowd, my heart still pounding, but a sense of liberation filling me. "Thank you," I said softly. And then I turned and walked off the stage, leaving behind the family that had never truly seen me for who I was. The night after the shocking revelation at the wedding reception, everything felt different. The air felt thick with tension. The silence between my parents and me like a chasm that I wasn't sure could ever be bridged. But I knew that the time had come. I could no longer live under their thumb, pretending that everything was fine, pretending that I didn't feel like a constant afterthought in my own family. I had spent too many years bending over backwards, playing the role of the dutiful daughter, always trying to win their approval, always trying to prove myself. But now, that was over. I had to have this conversation with them. I couldn't wait any longer. I couldn't live in their world of pretense and deception. It was time to establish my boundaries firm. Unshakable boundaries. I would no longer let them define me by their standards. I was done being their scapegoat. Their invisible daughter. I had been waiting for their acknowledgement for far too long. And I had realized that it wasn't coming, and I didn't need it anymore. As I walked into the living room, I could see my parents sitting there, avoiding eye contact, as though pretending nothing had changed would somehow make it disappear. But I wasn't going to let that happen. I wasn't going to let them sweep this under the rug like they had done with so many other things. "Grace," my mother began, her voice trembling slightly, "we need to talk. What you did last night, it was wrong. You embarrassed us in front of everyone." I could hear the anger in her voice. But there was something else too. Fear. Fear of being exposed. Fear of losing control. My mother had always been the one to hold everything together in front of the world. The one who kept up the illusion of the perfect family. But that was over now. I had broken the illusion, and she didn't know how to handle it. I stood tall, not letting her words shake me. "What's wrong?" "Mum, the truth hurt too much for you," I said it calmly. But the sharpness in my voice was unmistakable. "I'm not going to apologize for telling the truth. You have spent years telling me I wasn't good enough, telling me I wasn't worthy of anything. But the truth is, I have given so much of myself to this family emotionally, financially, and yet, I've been nothing but an afterthought in your eyes." She looked at my father, who was sitting beside her, his face red with anger. He hadn't spoken yet, but I knew he was just waiting for the right moment to jump in and defend the family's actions. But I wasn't about to let him dictate the terms of this conversation anymore. "Grace, you don't understand." My father finally spoke, his voice low and controlling. "We were trying to protect you. We didn't want to burden you with all of this. We didn't want you to worry about money. We thought it was better this way." I shook my head, the anger rising inside me. "You thought it was better to leave me in the dark. You thought it was better to shut me out of everything that mattered, including the wealth you've been hoarding for yourselves. Don't you get it? It's not about money. It's about the years of emotional betrayal, the constant comparisons, the way you treated me like I wasn't enough, That's what hurts more than anything. It's not about the money you hid from me, it's about how you've never seen me for who I truly am. My father stood up abruptly, his voice rising in frustration. You've never understood. Grace, you've always been so independent, so stubborn. You never wanted our help. And now you're angry because we didn't give you what you think you deserved. No, I said, cutting him off. I didn't want your help, but I did want your respect. I did want to be seen as more than just the one who took care of everything, the one who cleaned up everyone's mess. I wanted to be treated like a person who mattered, not like a burden you could push aside whenever it suited you. The room grew quieter, and I could feel my father's presence looming over me. But I refused to be intimidated. I had spent too many years being the silent one, the one who never spoke up, the one who always let them walk all over me, but not anymore. From now on, I will no longer be a part of this family dynamic. I won't continue to support you financially, emotionally, or any other way. I've been doing that for years, and it has gotten me nowhere. I've sacrificed my own happiness, my own well-being for the sake of this family, and I'm done. I will no longer let you use me to prop up your lies or your insecurities. I turned to my mother, who had been quiet up until now, her face pale and expressionless. And you, Mom, you've always played the role of the perfect, self-sacrificing mother, but I can't keep pretending that your love for me is unconditional. It's not. Your love has always come with strings attached, with expectations that I could never meet. I don't want your approval anymore. I don't need it. My parents were silent, stunned into submission by my words. For the first time in my life, I saw them for what they really were: flawed, scared, and deeply selfish. They had spent so long holding me under their thumb that they didn't know how to react when I finally pushed back. And that silence was exactly what I needed. It was my proof that I was no longer the person they had tried to shape me into. I was no longer their dutiful, obedient daughter. I was my own person now. I'm walking away, I said firmly, my voice unwavering, and I'm not looking back. My mother opened her mouth as if to protest, but she didn't know what to say. There was nothing left to say. The words had been spoken, and the truth was out. I wasn't the person they had always treated me as. I wasn't going to continue to play the role they had assigned me. I had finally found the strength to stand up for myself, and I wasn't going to let anyone take that away from me. Without waiting for another word, I turned on my heel and walked out of the room. I didn't need to hear their apologies or excuses. I didn't need their validation anymore. I had done what I needed to do. I had taken control of my life, and I wasn't going to let anyone define me again. As I left the house, I felt a sense of relief wash over me. It was as if a weight had been lifted from my shoulders. I had finally severed the ties that had bound me to a toxic environment, and for the first time in a long time, I felt free. Behind me, my parents sat in stunned silence, grappling with their own guilt and shame. They had no one left to blame but themselves, and for the first time in my life, I realized that I didn't need them anymore. As I walked away from my parents' home that night, something in me shifted. I could feel it in my bones. This wasn't just the end of a conversation. It was the end of a chapter in my life, one that I had clung to for far too long. The chapter where I tried to meet others' expectations, where I lived in search of validation from people who could never truly see me. The weight that had burdened me for so many years was finally lifting, piece by piece. The night was quiet, the streets eerily still as I made my way back to my apartment. The city lights flickered like distant stars, and for the first time in what felt like forever, I breathed deeply, feeling a kind of freedom I had never known. The pressure, the guilt, the need to be someone I wasn't, they were all gone. As I sat in the solitude of my apartment that night, I reflected on everything that had transpired. I had spent so many years searching for approval from my parents, trying to measure up to their impossible standards. I had sacrificed my own happiness, my sense of self, and my peace of mind, believing that if I could just make them proud, I would be whole. But now, I realized that this was all a lie. The truth I had discovered over the past few days was both painful and liberating. The value of a person isn't tied to money, titles, or the approval of others. It's not something that can be handed to you by others. It's something you must create for yourself. Self-respect and authenticity are the only true measures of worth. And no one, not even my family, could take that from me anymore. For the first time in years, I felt a sense of peace. I didn't need their validation to feel worthy. I didn't need their approval to know that I was enough. It had taken me a long time to come to terms with this, but I was finally living for myself, not for the expectations of others. I was free to define my own success, on my own terms. But even with that newfound freedom, there were questions that still lingered in my mind. Could I forgive my parents for all the years of neglect and emotional abuse? Could I ever forgive them for how they had treated me? For the way they had manipulated me into thinking I wasn't enough? And even more challenging, could I forgive myself for allowing myself to be used? For waiting so long to break free? I realized that forgiveness isn't always about the other person. Sometimes, it's about finding peace within yourself. It's about accepting that the people who hurt you may never ask for forgiveness, and learning to forgive them anyway. It's about acknowledging your pain, understanding that it doesn't define you, and choosing to move forward. But it also raises a deeper question. Can we truly forgive those who've never asked for forgiveness? Or do we simply learn to forgive ourselves for their mistakes, for our own sake? The weight of that question lingered in my mind as I sat in the quiet of my apartment, staring out the window at the city below. The answer wasn't clear, and maybe it never would be. But what I did know was this: I was done seeking approval from people who would never be able to give it to me. I was done playing the role of the dutiful daughter, the one who sacrificed everything for others. I had learned that true happiness doesn't come from meeting others' expectations. It comes from embracing who you truly are, from accepting that you are enough just as you are. As I looked at my reflection in the window, I realized something else. I didn't need anyone else's validation to feel complete. I had the power to create my own path, to build a life that was true to me, not to the image that others had of me. And so, I made a promise to myself that night. I would live my life for me, not for anyone else. I would create my own definition of success, one that wasn't tied to wealth, approval, or anyone else's expectations. It would be a life built on self-respect, authenticity, and peace of mind. But there was still one lingering question, one that I couldn't quite shake. How much are we willing to sacrifice for family, and at what cost? What is the true measure of success? And what happens when we stop seeking approval from the people who have always expected too much from us? These were the questions that would shape the next chapter of my life. I didn't have all the answers, but I was no longer afraid to ask them, because sometimes it's in the questions that we find our truest selves. And so, as I closed my eyes and let the quiet of the night settle in around me, I asked myself one final question, one that I leave with you as well. Can we truly forgive those who've never asked for forgiveness, or do we simply learn to forgive ourselves for their mistakes? The answer, I suppose, is something we all have to figure out for ourselves. But what I do know is this: the journey of self-forgiveness and self-discovery is the most important journey of all, and it starts with learning to love and respect ourselves without waiting for anyone else's permission.